Hello everyone. Today's video is a little bit different from what I've been talking about lately, but it's also sort of sparked by it. Not so much the things regarding logic and philosophy, but more the things I've been talking about regarding Ukraine and the war that's happening over there. As you can imagine, there's been a lot of Russian propaganda being spread all over the place, and there's been Ukrainian propaganda as well. And I've been especially critical of those on the right who are falling for the Russian propaganda, because based on their own self-proclaimed intellectual superiority, they are the last people who ought to fall for it. But really, that self-proclaimed intellectual superiority has always been a sham. I've mentioned before how ridiculous the conspiracy theories were after the 2020 election. I'm not saying that all of the theories lacked any corroborating or suggestive evidence behind them, but those aspects that could at least have been discussed among rational people were swept right out the door by the ludicrous claims that were obviously idiotic to begin with. The wildest conspiracy theories made it possible to completely overlook the actual problems that had been exposed. And because of that, it has led to the current situation in America, where every 10 minutes Tim Pool is releasing another video about the coming civil war. Yeah, or if he's talking about Ukraine, it's always the nonstop torrent of World War III is upon us! Run for the hills! But as dumb as all of that has been, I mean, it's good clickbait for Tim Pool. He's making millions. Big deal. This actually goes back way further. Look, here's the reality. About 2 months ago, maybe 3 months ago, I rewatched the original X-Files series from the early 90s, up until about season 6 or so, where they jumped the shark and got so far up the tailpipe of their own mythos that they had no clue what direction to swim for air. And I can tell you that anyone who thinks that people today are conspiracy freaks clearly either was born too late to know what the 90s were like, or they did so many drugs in the 80s that they have no recollection of the 90s at all. Because that decade was the epitome of conspiracy theories. In fact, I remember being in high school when the Oklahoma City bombing happened. When the news broke, I remember they'd set up a TV in the library at school, and they were showing the headlines from CNN. And I remember an anchor saying that they were suspecting a possible Muslim terrorist attack. This was just a couple years after the Twin Towers were first attacked via a car bomb in the basement. So it kind of made sense to speculate that maybe the terrorists had moved on to a random federal building in the middle of Oklahoma City. However, the same time that I heard that, I remember turning to a friend and saying, watch it be some militia wacko, which it turned out to have been. Now, why did I say that? It's not because I'm imbued with the disembodied soul of Nostradamus. No, it's because there were a handful of wacko militia-type conspiracy nut jobs who went to my church. You can tell by how I just label them there what sort of impression these bozos left on me. I will credit them with one thing. It's because of what they said and my experience with them that I've never fallen for any of these conspiracy type theories at all. Especially any that require people to act intelligently for the conspiracy to work. Because if there's one thing that people are, it's not intelligent. Just as an aside, I do remember mentioning to one of these conspiracy theorists at one point, I said, I do think the Oklahoma City bombing was a conspiracy. And I watched his eyes light up with joy. Just as I said, yeah, I think Timothy McVeigh conspired to do it and set it off with help of his friends. The fact that this conspiracy bozo almost punched me afterwards, it was still worth it. I guess that was my best real-life example of an epic troll that I've ever done. It would have been worth a punch if he had hit me, to be honest, getting him like that. So anyway, but if all I wanted to do was talk about this sort of anecdotal thing regarding conspiracies, this video wouldn't really serve much of a purpose. It wouldn't be worth recording. Instead, I want to investigate just why it is that conspiracy theories remain so popular. Because there are a few key things that, if you understand the psychology of what's going on, you can use that knowledge to fortify yourself and keep yourself from falling for the conspiracy theories. Because the truth is, the people who are promoting the conspiracy theories, they are the ones you actually need to watch out for. Not because they are intentionally conspiring themselves or any of that. No, it's because they probably even do believe it, but maybe especially if they are the legitimate ones who believe it, they are emotionally manipulating you and therefore getting you to disengage your mind. And at that point, they have the ability to sell you anything. So let's start with what is the seductive aspect of a conspiracy theory. The primary hook is that you have access to hidden secret knowledge. This secret knowledge is extremely seductive to the human psyche. I mean, I could go way back in time, like even 2,000 years earlier than Timothy McVeigh, to show you an example of how seductive this hidden knowledge is. You see in the Gnostic texts that the early church had to deal with, Gnosticism was so potent and powerful because it promised access to this secret knowledge. The real true words of Christ, for example, telling you the secret wisdom that the uber powerful Catholic Church was seeking to hide from you for reasons and stuff and things. Never mind. The Catholic Church didn't even exist as that type of institution until hundreds of years after these texts were written. But why get picky at a time like this? Anyway, it's simple psychology as to why this secret knowledge hooks you so much. The average person is not a genius. Now, this is not an insult. It's the definition of the word. I mean, a genius is usually defined as the top 1% of a population. At least that's how we define it now. So if you're looking at the bell curve distribution of intelligence, the fact that the fattest part of the bell curve is along the range of average intelligence means that the vast majority of people are just that, average. But everyone wants to excel. So if you have access to some kind of secret knowledge, things that you know but that no one else does, then this gives your psyche a kick. You have an inside track. Sure, maybe you can't do calculus in your head, but you can see the shadowy organizations at work behind the scenes, influencing the cost of your caramel macchiato. You've heard words like the Federal Reserve, and you've heard the names of people like the Rockefellers. The blank stares of other people when you try to bring up this. That's not evidence that you don't know what you're talking about. No. It's evidence that you know something they don't. At a basic human level, everyone wants that edge. Everyone yearns for something to separate them from being average. And that's a powerful psychological force. It's a very seductive force. But you can kind of tell with the examples I'm giving, that type of secret knowledge has to be something of value, or it's pointless. I mean, no one cares if you have the secret knowledge of the KFC spice recipe. But if your secret knowledge has the potential to put your life in jeopardy, now it's worth something. If you know the secrets of how the CIA killed JFK, the CIA might try to snuff you out. And again, this goes back to the Gnostic texts even. A Gnostic scripture is only of value if the Catholic Church will conduct an inquisition and execute you for translating it. If the Catholic Church simply says, yeah, we know about that text, it's a heresy that a handful of Essene priests believed, then that's an impotent secret knowledge to contain. But if it's a Gnostic text that some anonymous 14th century monk got burned at the stake for just mentioning to a friend by accident, and now you have access to that translation, suddenly you've become a threat to the entire Vatican apparatus, which again is only scary if you actually believe anyone on earth cares about this Vatican apparatus. But now you're talking about a secret knowledge worth having. And the same thing is true of the 2020 election. If you have secret knowledge that results in the FBI, the NSA, or the CIA wanting to terminate you with extreme prejudice, access to a secret that can crumble the very intelligence services of this nation, that is a hell of a lot of power to think you have access to. You can bring down the entire US government with the secret knowledge that you have. The ego boost that gives you is more intoxicating to your mind than mainlining heroin. So there's the root of it. You need some kind of secret knowledge that must be worth enough to make extremely powerful agencies take interest in you. And you have to have a sense of danger, or the secret knowledge is pointless. It doesn't serve any good. But that also immediately brings up another problem. This sort of secret knowledge has to have an aspect about it that needs to be obscure. If it's too obvious of a thing, then everybody would know this. So in order for it to be a secret knowledge that you have but other people don't, then you have to have something that needs to connect the dots to be seen. Otherwise, people far smarter than you would have already seen it, right? And so those dots not only have to be connected, but they have to be in a way that's not immediately obvious. It has to maintain some level of connection that is connected with reality, because otherwise you'd be sent to the asylum, but it can't be so obvious that everybody would have already known it. So how does this get accomplished for the conspiracy theory to work? It's actually extremely easy to do this. All you need to do is to present facts. Facts that everyone accepts, or that at least it can be argued that a reasonable person would accept. You present these facts as if they are connected. In reality, they're not connected at all. But the fact that a human mind could make a connection between them gives the false sense that knowledge is actually being imparted by this set of facts. Let me give you a simple analogy of this. So, fact number 1, John F. Kennedy was assassinated in 1963. Fact number 2, in 1965, 2 years later, Johnson escalated the Vietnam War by sending a lot more troops over to Vietnam. Fact number 3, weapons companies made a lot of money by selling equipment to the U.S. military during the Vietnam War. Now, those 3 facts are just sitting out there. I've just mentioned 3 facts. And these are all either completely obvious facts from history, or at least facts that are pretty straightforward and would be obvious. It's pretty clear that weapons factories are going to make a lot of money by selling weapons to an army actually using them, right? So all we need to do at this point is just provide a gentle nudge, the suggestion that these 3 facts are actually connected. So weapons companies needed LBJ in place because JFK was not going to escalate the war in Vietnam. Therefore, weapons companies are behind the JFK assassination. That connection is completely made up. There's not one shred of evidence for that connection yet. The average person will feel as if there is a connection simply because they know that these 3 facts are there and they accept those 3 facts. This is the number 1 trick for how propaganda fools you. The best propaganda doesn't need to state a single lie. It merely needs to make you think you found a connection between facts. So again, in the early 80s, Ronald Reagan wanted to implement Star Wars, a ballistic missile shield to protect us against the USSR, not the movie. The Space Shuttle Challenger exploded shortly after that, and therefore these satellites couldn't be sent up into orbit. There's no connection between those 2 facts, but you kind of felt like there was, didn't you? It's a very short step from that to saying there is a connection, and only certain people are able to connect those dots and see it. Immediately, you have the sense of ego needed for this conspiracy to work. All you've got to do is slap another powerful agency on it that has the potential to end your life if you cross them. The Democrats opposed Star Wars. Therefore, the Democrat Party blew up the Challenger so that Star Wars could never get implemented, since now there was no way to launch satellites into space. Therefore, the Democrats were working with the commies from the USSR all along. Oh yes, for those who forgot the 80s, back then it was the Republicans accusing the Democrats of being in the pocket of Russia. Now it's the Democrats accusing the Republicans of being in the pockets of the Russians. You think it's a coincidence? you think it's a coincidence that in 1988, in that presidential election, the Republican Party was colored blue and the Democrat Party was colored red on the electoral map? But in 1992 and every year since, the Democrats have been blue and the Republicans red. What are they trying to hide? See how easy it is? Anyone who remembers those elections, by the way, or if you just look up old newspapers, you can see that that is how the map was colored back then. That's a true fact. But the emotional feeling that you get where you're making these connections that aren't even there, and you think you're opening your eyes to some secret facts that others don't know, that's just your brain fooling you into thinking you're smarter than you actually are, that you can see better than other people, and that you have come up with something profound that everyone else has missed. I am truly sorry to burst your bubble, but the truth is you haven't. So how do you protect yourself? Well, step one is being forewarned. Now that you know how easy it is to get misled by your emotions, you can check that. If you believe anything at all, it doesn't matter what, your history books even, go ahead. If you believe anything that you've read on anything, then what is the reason you believe it? If that reason is only emotional, then it's not a reason. You just have an emotional, right? And emotions and reason are often in conflict with each other. Second, suppose you do have the facts. Are these facts in isolation? You need more than just the fact of something. If these two facts are to be connected, you need the fact of the connection to be established as well before you can insist that the connection itself is real. Just being suspicious or thinking that something might be connected is not evidence, period. And look, there's nothing wrong with thinking that there may be a connection, but saying that you know something is connected when it's really just a feeling that two things might be connected is, by definition, self-delusion. But by insisting that it's true, you're not just deluding yourself. Now you're deluding other people as well. And yes, it is very hard work to insist on everything that you can think of being grounded in actual evidence. But if you don't want to be emotionally manipulated into believing nonsense, and as a result being led by the nose to your own destruction, you have to put in that work. The good news, you can. You do not need to be a genius to keep from falling for this tactic. You just have to be honest with yourself and understand that you're not going to be the one person on earth who can see how it all fits together in some kind of secret pattern. You have to be honest with yourself, and you have to go where the evidence goes and no further. Again, speculate as much as you want, but be honest that it is speculation at that point. If you're insisting something is true, if you're insisting you have a reason for it, you must actually have that reason. And again, everybody who makes that goal can accomplish it. You don't have to be a genius to do that. With all of that, I hope you now have a wonderful day.